In business news today, 3 things to know. First, election countdown. With less than a week to midterm elections, this year will be the most expensive in history, ringing up a $4 billion tab. Then, while the gender gap narrows, but still has a long way to go, with a pay gap estimated to take 80 years to close. And ka-ching, Halloween sales to scare up big bucks for retailers as a record number of consumers celebrate the spookiest holiday of the year. The Rise Xchange starts right now. Hello, I'm Julian Phillips in for Andrew the Smirtsy Smirts, coming to you a little earlier there. The Fed wrapped up its monthly meeting today, and to no one's surprise, will keep key interest rates at a record low for, quote, a considerable time. The Fed also says it will stop its bond purchasing program at the end of October. Well, the market shrugged it all off, but did end the day in the red. Well, here's a look at the final numbers. The Dow closed at 16,974. The S&P 500 is down fractionally to 1982. And the NASDAQ ended the day down 15 points at 4549. Major quarterly earnings reports out today. Visa said it beat earnings estimates after the bell today. Earnings per share of $2.18 were 4% above forecast. $3.2 billion in revenue was in line with analysts' expectations. Goodyear posted a major win on earnings. EPS of 87 cents came out way ahead of estimates. But revenue of $4.7 billion was 5% below expectations. Well, Hershey's earnings per share missed expectations this quarter, hurt by rising milk prices and a strong dollar. Hershey's revenue of nearly $2 billion was in line with consensus estimates. Well, now for a look at commodities. Gold closing down at $1,211.10 an ounce, and oil closing at $82.31 per barrel. Well, the midterm elections are less than 1 week away. Can you believe it? And the campaigns all across the country have already spent a record amount of money. Get this, about $4 billion. We're here to break it all down for us is Rise News Washington correspondent Priya Sridhar. Priya, welcome, of course, to the Exchange. Why is the election so expensive this year? I guess it's kind of a rhetorical question.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know exactly why, but I think what's most interesting about this election is that the Washington Post has called these midterm elections the elections that no one is paying any attention to. But despite that, as you said, the spending up until this point is about $4 billion, which is actually 6 times more than the last midterm elections and twice as much as the 2004 presidential elections. The New York Times did note that about 55% of the political advertising money that's coming in is coming from groups where the donors actually aren't fully disclosed. So obviously that raises a few eyebrows here in Washington. And there's also a lot of dark money. And analysts are saying that a lot of that money is being used for advertising that's simply factually incorrect, where the opponents are saying that their opponents are taking money from certain groups that they're not taking money from. So obviously that raises a few eyebrows as well.
But Priya, we know exactly why they're spending so much money. These midterm elections are very, very important this time around before the major presidential election in 2016. We're talking about governor's races. We're talking about also control of the Senate here. And that's why so much money is being spent, especially by the Koch brothers, over $53 million.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And, you know, the Koch brothers are no strangers to contributing money for political purposes. So it's not unusual for them to be spending a lot of money. But what's interesting also is that most of the money that's being spent in this election is being spent by outside groups, not by the candidates themselves. And so that raises a lot of concerns as far as corruption and you know, whether there needs to be some sort of federal campaign finance reform. And a lot of people are saying that given the numbers that we're seeing, $4 billion, something has to be done to sort of cap this for the 2016 presidential election. And you know, there's real concerns here that people are not going to run for elections if they feel like they can't raise that money or they are not independently wealthy as well.
You're shaking the cobwebs off of that phrase, campaign finance reform. We heard that a lot, and people saying, yes, we need it, but nobody's done it at this point, and I don't think anybody's going to do it. Here's the thing I want to ask you is, there's downsides to all this excessive spending, isn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, transparency for one, right? I mentioned the fact that a lot of these groups who are contributing massive amounts of money, their donors are not fully disclosed to the public. And you know, people want to know, where is my candidate getting their money from? And how is that going to influence they make decisions? I mean, what's really happening here is a lot of people are saying, listen, what's driving the agenda and what's driving the issues that my political candidate is advocating for is really who's giving them money, and that's not what the average American person really wants to hear.
Well, I got to tell you what, one thing I'll be glad of outside of spending all this money is a candidate getting on the air for his own ad and saying, I approve this message. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. If you're in it, of course you're going to approve the message. But anyway, we're going to see more about this, and hopefully they'll do something about campaign finance reform, perhaps. Priya, Sridhar, thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, what are the best countries when it comes to equality for women? You'll find out when Arise Exchange returns. Stay with us.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. As we reported yesterday, this week the World Economic Forum released the Global Gender Gap Report. And it outlines equality between men and women in the workplace. Saadia Zahidi is the Senior Director of Gender Parity, Human Capital, and Constituents at the World Economic Forum's headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. And she works globally to assist countries and companies to improve the roles and numbers of women in their organizations. And she joins us here to discuss this report. Welcome to Arise Exchange.
Thank you.
You know, this is very interesting here. And although the report outlines the top 10 countries, it's important to note that a whole lot really hasn't closed in the few years. But we find at the top of this list Nordic countries. Why is this?
So the Nordic countries are once again at the top, as you said, but they've only closed somewhere between 80 and 90% of their gender gap. Mm-hmm. So you have to see that even the highest ranking countries in the world haven't actually reached parity. But why they are where they are, they have they have parity on health, they have parity on education. They're doing pretty well in terms of women's labor force participation. They still have wage gaps, they still have a gap in leadership positions, and they're doing extremely well in terms of political empowerment.
The thing that gets me is we're looking at a couple of countries on this list. Rwanda, for one, is kind of surprising to me. Nicaragua, the Philippines, they're also at the top here, but the U.S. lags far behind, 20th overall, and 65th when it comes to the wage gap there. And I find that completely surprising.
So what we're trying to do is measure how equally countries are dividing resources and opportunities between women and men, regardless of the level of the resources and opportunities. So whether it's a rich country or a poor country, how equal are they? That's what we're trying to understand. And when you look at gender gaps that way, countries like Rwanda and the Philippines actually make it into the top 10 because, yes, they do have large health gaps, yes, they do have large education gaps, but they're doing very well in terms of women's political empowerment, and they're doing very well in terms of labor force participation. In fact, in Rwanda, there are more women in the labor force than there are men.
Right, of course, we're seeing that in some of the emerging countries, the BRIC countries, like, for instance, Brazil. You know, Dilma Rousseff, she just won again. Rousseff just won again in Brazil. But what I find kind of interesting in this whole study here, and I was looking at this, there are a lot of countries that have bridged the gap totally when it comes to health and survival. Explain that.
So when we look at aggregate numbers of the healthy life expectancy for women versus men, so that's the average life expectancy, and you take away the years that are lost to disease and disability, for a lot of the world, this is looking pretty good for women. The same applies to education. There are actually 25 countries in the world that have completely closed the education gap. So primary, secondary, university schooling, literacy rates in the overall population that have completely closed those gaps. And so what this really points to is that women and men are equally healthy, equally educated, but women are not being channeled effectively into the workforce nor into political decision making.
Well, here's something that comes shocking right before Halloween, 2 days before Halloween. The last country on the gender gap equality is Yemen. Oh, God, I'm so surprised and shocked about that.
Well, Yemen is the last country in the world in terms of gender equality. Women have about half of the resources and opportunities that men have. But at the same time, we've been doing this for 9 years. It is one of the countries that has, relative to its starting point, made the most changes compared to where it started out. And Saudi Arabia is another country that is towards the bottom of the rankings, but relative to where it started out, it's made the greatest change in terms of women in economic participation.
The one thing I just want to talk about quickly here before we close is that the emerging countries, Brazil, South Africa, China, Russia, India. India 114, China 87, Russia 75. Are you surprised by those numbers and rankings?
You know, India and China still have very large gaps when it comes to the sex ratio at birth. So there's still a strong preference for sons. And so girls are simply not even having the right to be born in certain parts of those societies. And then in other parts of those societies, so in China has very high labor force participation rates for women. In the case of India, it's actually moving backwards in terms of labor force participation. Women are leaving the workforce. 9 million women have left the workforce in the last 10 years.
Well, in closing, I guess the sad news is that it's going to take about 81 years to close the gap, according to the study, in total for women to catch up to men. And hopefully next year when you come and drop by Xchange, that they'll have better numbers for us.
I hope so.
Saadia, Zahidi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. Time now for our business ticker, stories making headlines across the nation and, of course, around the world. Fighting tax evasion, that's what 51 financial ministers and tax officials from around the world committed to doing today. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says countries will swap bank data to prevent individuals from holding secret accounts. Of course, this is an attempt to restore confidence in the financial system after the financial crisis. Neither the U.S. nor Switzerland signed the pact. That's very interesting. Speaking of taxes, the nation's largest bank, J.P. Morgan, has scrapped its $6.5 billion plan to relocate its headquarters to Manhattan's West Side. Why? Well, the bank cited the city's reluctance to offer $1 billion in incentives and the high cost of buying land. Okay. 10 seconds. That's the time researchers say hedge funds and other high-frequency traders have when accessing company information from the SEC that could move the markets. Well, the study from the universities of Chicago and Colorado shows a time lag in data being posted to the SEC's website compared to when it's provided to traditional wire services. So, how can you get workers to complete their timesheets? Well, it's not a fun task. Nobody likes that. But this is where the tap server comes in, folks. A Minneapolis ad firm uses technology to scan employee key cards to confirm whether timesheets were completed. Okay, but get this. Once verified, the workers can select from a variety of beers. Where do you sign me and my crew up? Come on, guys. All right. Halloween sales are expected to scare up big bucks for retailers this year. Sales of costumes, candy, decorations, and greeting cards should hit $7.4 billion, up more than 7% from last year. And consumers are expected to spend a record $350 million on costumes for their pets. Well, here to tell us why Halloween sales are so strong is Burt Flickinger, managing director of the Strategic Resource Group, a retail and consumer goods consulting firm. Welcome. And that's Flickinger, as my producers tell me. Forgive me about that.
No
Don't
worries.
hang me now. Come on. Goodness sakes. It's Halloween.
It's Halloween
I got to watch
season,
no
right.
chainsaws in your pocket. I don't understand this. With the economy the way it is, people complaining all up and down the line, spending down to a certain degree, Halloween costume sales up. Explain this to me.
Part of it, Julian, is Halloween's falling on a Friday night, so it's not a work night, not a school night, so both parents and kids can go out and celebrate. It's treats. Kids are spending more time in school, more time studying. Parents are working more hours, oftentimes making less money. So it's a fun time for the family during some tough times.
Well, yeah, well, you know, I just want to say that tough times. You see so much going on: beheadings, ISIS. You know, we're looking at lava flows. We're looking at natural disasters. So I guess, in a sense, this is a way for people just to kind of get away from it all.
It's one night, one celebration, a lot of parties for students after school and family and friends. And it is a good break, to your point, Julian, from the troubles that are worldwide.
I'm looking at some of the numbers here. Candy, $2.2 billion. Costumes, $2.8 billion. Decorations, $2 billion. Greeting cards. I never gave greeting cards on Halloween. This has got to be a new, maybe I'm just old, but this has got to be a new phenomenon.
No, you're not old, Julian. You should advise the retailers because they have more space for greeting cards than almost anything, and they're selling fewer greeting cards every year.
Well, let me ask you a question. In terms of the #1 selling items, I mean, of course, costumes for pets, but for humans, let's start with humans first. The one thing I didn't really find kind of funny, and I really don't want to talk about it that much, but apparently the Ebola outfit is being sold pretty rapidly. I don't get that.
Ebola outfit's outrageous, and then Walmart got in more trouble this week by having a special featured section on its website, fat girls costumes. So it's almost like going after women who may weigh a little bit.
I'm not going to touch that one.
Right, and so there's tremendous scandal. Walmart took that part of the site down, but to have so many executives review a site and you know, really not have it be conscientious for consumers is concerning.
Can we keep this kind of trend up here? I can imagine what it's going to be like next year with, you know, record sales so far this year.
With the 7%, we expect it to continue because, to your present point about pet costumes being 12% of total, pets are becoming part of the families, even small living quarters and apartments. People are going out with their pets, the kids and adults. And so with pet costumes growing and becoming more of a neighborhood and family and fun event, we expect Halloween to grow faster than almost any other retail sales period.
Burt, in closing here, I've got to ask you, why would you dress up a pet?
Well, Rise TV had Reggie the rescue dog on last year, and Reggie didn't mind being on a Rise TV in a pet costume, so I don't dress up my pets, but Ashley Glazer, Nick Flickinger, and some do.
There's no need to fear. Underdog is here.
Speed of lightning, power of thunder, catching crooks who rob and plunder.
Power twins activate, Burt. I love you. The Flickinger Meister, I love you. Burt, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for teaming up, Julian. Really appreciate it.
Right. Ahead, scoring $1 billion tax break for buying a basketball team. That's right. You're watching Arise Exchange.
Apple unveiled new products today. Did it meet expectations?
Apple stock is up 20%.
The White House says it has proper measures to contain the spread of Ebola.
This seems to be, in some ways, exploding. What are officials saying?
We remain focused on working with our partners on the ground to stop the epidemic.
Enhanced measures have been put in place in Africa and the United States.
This is hitting home in a very real way, and I think, yeah, we need to be concerned.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
Last week on Arise Exchange, the nauseating numbers from two iconic brands and whether they have a plan to turn around their businesses. Existing home sales surged to their best numbers. Can the broader markets support that in the real estate business?
When long-term interest rates are low, it's usually a bad sign for the macro economy.
Toys R Us is defending its decision to sell Breaking Bad action figures. The toys come with a detachable sack of cash and a bag of meth. Not real meth, fake meth. Watch this week for more Arise Exchange.
I love this segment. Steve Ballmer, you know the name. He made headlines when he bought the Los Angeles Clippers for $2 billion, the highest ever paid for an NBA franchise. But now a report from the Financial Times says he may get about half of that, $1 billion, back in tax benefits over the next 15 years. We're here to tell us more about the tax break is Mike Bako, sports editor at thedailynational.com. Of course, it's always good to see you.
Thank you.
And I love that suit.
Thank you.
About $1 billion suit there.
Oh.
Now, come on. $1 billion in tax incentives over 15 years?
Absolutely. Does this surprise you? The rich getting richer, the rich finding tax loopholes, the rich repurposing tax laws and loopholes that were intended to be for media conglomerates and media companies. So when you're talking about NBA teams and guys who know how to work the system, and with over $1 billion involved, they're going to find ways to write it off.
Well, you just said it like that. This is a song that reminds me back in the 70s. Over like a fat rat. I mean, come on, Mike. I mean, look, aren't there any kind of rules or regulations, put constraints on this kind of stuff? Obviously, he knew what he was doing, because when most people saw this, he was willing to spend this kind of money. And we have to underscore this. He's like worth about $22 billion.
$22 billion, yeah.
But
pocket change.
But still, $2 billion. And people are saying, And now we're looking at it and saying, hey, we understand.
Smart move, but it's a smart move to buy any professional sports team. Ballmer's not buying this for the money that he's going to make this year, next year, over the next 10 years, even with the new NBA TV deal, where every team, before they even open up the season, is going to be making $90 million into their coffers. He's looking at this for down the road. Donald Sterling bought the San Diego Clippers at the time for $25 million. George Steinbrenner bought the Yankees for $25 million.
Unbelievable.
And now these teams are worth billions of dollars. So this is the long play by Steve Ballmer. Plus, he's a basketball fan. He's got $22 billion. This is going to be his hobby now that he's retired from Microsoft.
Okay, so we see this tax incentive. We also see a new TV deal coming down the road. The question is going to make the owners richer. What about the players?
Players want their cut of that money, too. Guys like LeBron James and Kevin Durant, big name stars, Anthony Davis and the New Orleans Pelicans. This might be a bit of an impasse with the league in terms of how high they're going to raise the salary cap. New collective bargaining agreement can be opened up by either side after this coming season. So I think players are going to be looking for higher guaranteed contracts, longer term contracts, something that the owners are not going to want to do.
Okay, so I'm going to liken this to the real estate industry. You have a house that goes for $1.5 million in a neighborhood, okay, and that's raised up, say, 20 to 25%. Automatically, that increases the value of another house. Will this increase the value of other NBA teams?
You would only think that it would. You look at the recent sales of the Philadelphia 76ers just a couple years ago for less than $400 million. Milwaukee Bucks for $550 million. If you think about what a team like the Knicks or the Los Angeles Lakers or the Chicago Bulls would be worth in major metropolitan high TV ranking markets, astronomically, you're probably looking at $2-3 billion for those specific teams. So, of course, it's going to raise up other teams like the Atlanta Hawks. Their owner got into a bit of a issue over the summer with some racial comments. That team is going out on the block, sale being garnered by Goldman Sachs. That team will probably get double what they thought that it would have gotten just a few months ago.
We've got to end on the king. LeBron James. Okay, the fans are crying and crying that he left. Now he's back, and they're yelling and screaming, and they're up, thinking they're going to. But the ticket prices, my friend, Mike,
up.
I bet you people aren't so happy right now. What are we talking about?
We're talking about multiple hundreds of dollars for regular season games for every game on the secondary market. A face value ticket of $80 now going for upwards of $200-300 tops in the league now. Last year they were in the bottom fifth of the league in terms of resale on the open market. So that's the draw of LeBron James.
Well, as I always say, if it ain't about the money, it's about the money.
Exactly.
Mike Bako, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, nice suit. Next in our corner office, how to have fun while networking for business. You're watching Arise Exchange.
The search continues for the more than 200 abducted schoolgirls.
Unquestionably, this is a Nigerian problem.
President Barack Obama stopped short of visiting the border. Why can't Washington get anything done when it comes to immigration reform?
But you got to come up with a solution to it, and no one has a real solution.
Does this further terrorize people, make them more afraid, or is this making people angry? Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
Last week on Arise Exchange, the nauseating numbers from two iconic brands and whether they have a plan to turn around their businesses. Existing home sales surged to their best numbers.
Can the broader markets support that in the real estate business?
When long-term interest rates are low, it's usually a bad sign for the macro economy.
Toys R Us is defending its decision to sell Breaking Bad action figures. The toys come with a detachable sack of cash and a bag of meth. Not real meth, fake meth. Watch this week for more Arise Exchange.
In today's Corner Office, we're featuring Swap the Biz, a high-end networking business which holds events to create new referrals by swapping business for business. The company focuses on members building friendships in a social, fun environment rather than most networking groups that focus only on business. And here to network is Scott Eisenberg, CEO and founder of Swap the Biz. Welcome. Now, explain more what Swap the Biz actually is. What does it do?
So basically, we host high-end business networking events that are really social events with a business purpose. We focus on bringing the fun to these events, about people having a good time. It's all about relationship development, about people connecting, so to form a friendship first for the purpose of ultimately doing business.
Okay, so martini shaken, not stirred. You sit around, have a good time. What is actually Xchange? You say business for business. What are we talking about?
Well, at the end of the day, what are you trying to do? I'm trying to offer you opportunities, and you're trying to get opportunities from me, obviously. But at these events, really what's happening is we're connecting all on a social level because we create that kind of an environment. It's a high-end environment. We do a red carpet. It's really fun. We have entertainment at these events. We have a comedian that performed recently at an event. We had a magician. I mean, that's not what you would expect at a business networking event.
Fantastic. Okay, so like you swap business for business, but say I like golf and you like tennis. How do we connect?
That's a sport, right? That's an opportunity to connect.
You're quick, Scott. You're quick. Okay, I got you. All right, so that makes kind of sense then. Where does, say, money come into this at all? Any opportunities for that? And are we just talking about corporations, or are we talking about just individuals coming in? How does one get into this little club here that you have?
Okay, so money in terms of how do they join the group, or money in terms of what do they get out of the group?
Money in terms of what do they get? Okay, if you're swapping business for business, I guess in a sense it's almost like bartering. What else can you get out of this?
I mean, that's real. Well, I mean, you're getting relationships out of it. That's the basis of it. The whole idea and the whole premise, where we're different than everything else out there in networking, is traditional networking is you go to an event. And the idea is you and me are in the same industry. I want to be in an industry-specific event. Here, the difference is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because we're connecting on a social level first. And then, at the end of the day, it is business opportunities that we're trading outside of this because I like you.
What kind of companies have signed on to this? What are you looking at? High-tech companies?
We're industry agnostic. It's across the gamut. So we have tech companies. We have entertainment. We have finance. We have real estate. It's everything and anything under the sun because at the end of the day, we're really looking for good people. And what is a good person in this? It's someone who wants to have a good time and make new relationships.
Okay, we're not necessarily talking about Fortune 500 companies here. We're talking about lower tier companies, I would assume, that would want to get on this bandwagon.
In terms of members, yeah, these are small business owners and affluent professionals throughout Manhattan and the greater areas.
Is there any charge to become involved in this? How does one
Yeah, we have 3 different tiers of membership. At the top,
I figured as much, Scott. Go ahead.
At the top end, it's $2,500 a year, but we give a lot for this. You get to become a part of a morning breakfast referral group. You get access to our large-scale evening events. We give you a load of guest passes. We have other specialty events. We have
specialty events. I don't want to venture down that road.
Trade shows and seminars that we support as well that might not be our own.
I want to know about the 5 o'clock somewhere group. You got to have one of those somewhere.
The 5 o'clock somewhere group?
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I'm talking about the martini, the drinking group.
Oh, of course.
Come on, wake up here.
Oh, we have every month, of course. We have a once-a-month evening event. That's our large-scale event. That's where we do the red carpet. That's the fun event, you know. Not that the breakfasts aren't fun, but that's where we really get to socialize. That's where really everyone gets to be more laid back and connect.
What are your numbers? I mean, you know, they always say there's nothing new under the sun, but I've never really quite heard anything like this. I mean, other than going to a golf club and socializing with another business member, this is kind of unique as far as I can see.
Yeah, so we started these membership breakfast groups only in March. We started with 1 breakfast group. We immediately tripled to 3. We launched a 4th last week. We have a 5th coming in December. Each of these groups are functioning in the breakfast piece with 25 to 40 members, and the evening events are 100 to 150 attendees.
Here's what we're going to do in closing here. For the poor and disenfranchised like me, I suggest you have a shakedown group so I can come and shake down some of these people for money. How about that? And I'll give you a percentage.
Maybe we'll talk about
You got
that
a deal?
afterwards. Yeah, fair enough.
Money, money, money.
Money, money, money.
Scott Eisenberg, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Tomorrow on Exchange, how the IRS doesn't need to prove anyone is guilty of anything before seizing assets. You'll be surprised what they're basing it on. Now for another look at today's final numbers. The Dow closed at 16,974, the S&P 500, 1982, and the NASDAQ ended the day early, 45.49. I'm Julian, Phillips in for Andrew Schmertzy Smerch. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for watching Arise Exchange. See you then.